Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at using show, don't tell to improve our creative writing. Knowing when to show and when to tell is critical to keep the reader engaged and to stop our writing from becoming boring. Today I'm going to show you the difference between showing and telling, examples of each and how to use showing effectively in your writing. First, let's look at the difference between showing and telling. Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at using show, don't tell to improve our creative writing. Knowing when to show and when to tell is critical to keep the reader engaged and to stop our writing from becoming boring. Today I'm going to show you the difference between showing and telling, examples of each and how to use showing effectively in your writing. First, let's look at the difference between showing and telling. Telling is when you are informing the reader outright information about the character, their feelings and emotions, settings, atmospheres and plot. Whereas showing is when you allow the reader to experience this information in more detail, immersing the reader by using clues within the sentences and allowing them to infer how the character is feeling, what they might be thinking or what the atmosphere and settings are like. It's basically a detailed description. Rather than stating facts, with showing you are engaging the reader by creating experiences that will in turn create empathy with the character. When the reader cares about the character, they will want to read on. Here are some examples. It was a windy night. This is telling. It gets the point across simply by explaining that the weather is windy, but it's not allowing the reader to fully experience what is happening in the story. Think about what wind looks like. How does it move objects? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? When we understand this, we can start to describe this experience. For example, if we leave a window open, we can think about how the curtains would move in the wind. Let's look at this example. I glimpsed the full moon as the curtains billowed wildly. Now we are creating a more detailed setting and atmosphere. The word billowed means to rise and fall, so now the reader can infer that the curtains are rising and falling. Furthermore, by adding the word wildly, we can imagine that the curtains are moving more violently, emphasising the power of the wind and adding to the image in the reader's mind. The temperature was hot in the middle of the day. This sentence is telling the reader that the weather is hot. It's a simple sentence. To add detail to show how hot the weather is, we can look at how the characters react to the heat. James ran the back of his hand over his brow, wiping the sweat from his eyes and squinting at the midday sun. The added detail of the character physically wiping the sweat from his eyes and the actions of the character squinting allows the reader to infer his discomfort. James is struggling in the heat, and this creates empathy with the character. She was angry. This is a typical sentence students use thinking they are describing how the character is feeling. And they are, but it's another telling sentence. It doesn't tell you what this anger looks like. How angry is she? What does she look like when she's angry? What does she do when she is angry? She clenched her fists tightly, feeling her nails dig sharply into her palms, creating little red semicircles of pain. The word clenched here helps the reader to visualise that the character is not lashing out aggressively, it's not violent, they're actually trying to contain their anger. This is reinforced by that word tightly, as if they are holding themselves back. And the added detail of her nails digging sharply in her palms describes that physical pain that she is feeling, and then again it's emphasised by those red semicircles left imprinted on her palms. We've had to make the reader work a bit harder, but now they have a much deeper understanding of the character's emotions. So now we've got these basics, we can start looking at how to add more detail. Jack was terrified of spiders. Whenever he saw one, he wanted to scream. As with the examples before, this sentence gets the point across. It tells us how Jack was feeling and what he does when he sees a spider. If we change the sentence to show what Jack was feeling, it would look something like this. As the spider dropped down from the ceiling, Jack pressed his back against the far wall. Even though it was across the room, his skin crawled as if its legs were scuttling all over him. He breathed so quickly he felt like he wasn't breathing at all. On the wall, its shadow was 10 times larger than the arachnid itself, its legs looking sharp and demonic. Both examples illustrate the point that he is scared of spiders, but the second is more visceral. We actually see what that looks like rather than just being told he is scared of spiders. It's described to us. We can imagine the feelings associated with being in a room with a spider. We're immersed in his fear and how that fear manifests itself. Because we're shown what this looks like, what the spider is doing, what Jack is doing, how his body feels, how his breathing changes, and then back to the spider, the description is more convincing and engaging, whereas the telling has a different effect. It's much more straightforward. When we are writing a narrative, we need to be aware of the different times it is necessary to use showing instead of telling. I'm going to go through 5 examples with you. We're going to cover setting, atmosphere, character, feelings and emotions, and plot, all the key ingredients to writing a successful story. It would be a good idea to stop the video at the end of each example and have a go at writing your own description. Let's look at setting first. When a character arrives at a scene, it is easy to fall into that trap of listing everything they can see. In front of them was an ancient castle. The castle had walls and a drawbridge and a big moat. We're already established that listing is not the most effective way of creating description. Instead, you want to show. They stood before an ancient castle. The moss clung to the bricks like an old man's beard. One tower had caved in, leaving a pile of stones at the castle's foundation. And then you would go on to describe the moat and drawbridge in as much detail. When we create a setting, we also need to think about what the atmosphere is like. This helps to create the mood for the story. Like today, it's a gloomy day. If we were showing, it would look like this. Charcoal clouds hung over the park, their bellies now empty of water. The grass had been mushed into puddles and mud squelched under her boots as she walked. If you were trying to create a different atmosphere, perhaps an atmosphere that is spooky and eerie, but without using the words spooky and eerie, you might describe the fog and the cobwebs and those crows shrieking in the distance. Or, if you wanted to make the atmosphere feel claustrophobic, you might describe a busy city with masses of people crowding together and crushing the character. When we think of characters, we often give them a specific trait, like funny or moody or popular. In this example, he was a shy man who didn't like speaking to people. When we show this trait, it becomes, the doorbell rang and his chest tightened. He ducked down so he couldn't be seen through the window and tucked himself behind the chair, hugging his knees close. We can apply the same with a different trait. Another example could be, perhaps, if your character is adventurous. Rather than stating that the character is adventurous or outgoing, you could go into their shed and describe the bikes hanging from the wall, the canoes stacked on top of each other, the skis propped in the corner ready for the next season. And this makes it more believable that your character is actually adventurous and outdoorsy and what that really means to her. When we're thinking about character, we can also think about emotions. We think about how that character is feeling. In this example, the character feels content. It's a nice feeling, and therefore it needs a gentle description. She closes her eyes and feels the sunlight pulse against her face, soft but present. If she wasn't content, for example, if she was feeling flustered or agitated, you would change the description of the sun. Instead of it feeling a nice feeling, it would become something harsher instead of soft. Finally, we're going to look at plot. Where are the characters going and what are they doing? In this example, he went to a disused train track. For some readers, it would be quite hard to imagine what a disused train track looks like, and therefore we need to show the reader. The air smelled metallic. amplified by the heat penetrating the rusty tracks. He kicked a discarded can aside with the toe of his boot. It's important to spend time building up the plot, where the character is and what they are doing. The problem is if you move the characters on too quickly, your story is going to lack depth and it just won't be believable. So by introducing showing into your writing, it will become more creative, engaging and lively, and the reader will really be able to imagine your story in their imagination. It helps to create characters that feel real, that can be developed and are relatable, because we're actually showing their experiences rather than just being given a list of traits. So use this table, give it a go, and show, don't tell.